So there's been a lot going around, going on globally, in the Gen Z protesting space, or just the general protesting government's space. In the last, well, I just did 2025. There's been a lot of protests around the globe.
Oh yeah.
But specifically, what I'd like to have a quick chat about is the flag that Gen Z protesters have adopted.
Hell yeah.
The One Piece manga flag. The skull and it has a name. It's the name of the ship that they ride on. Someone can fill in the gaps. I don't watch One Piece.
Raijin,
Please, Raijin,
help.
please. Unless it's in here somewhere. For those of you who don't know what One Piece is, it's an anime. But this should hopefully give you a bit of a background as to why they've been flying this flag around the place. In Indonesia, it was hung outside homes, on motorbikes, cars, and trucks. It is in a sign of discontent with the government that boiled over into deadly protests, rallying against lavish perks enjoyed by politicians. In Nepal, it was draped on the golden gates of the palace that houses parliament, as young people toppled their government. In the Philippines, it was raised at rallies by protesters furious at alleged government corruption. The flag showing a cartoon skull wearing a hat, taken from the hugely popular Japanese anime One Piece, has become a symbol of defiance and hope for Gen Z protesters across Asia. Not just Asia, but a lot of places. In the 1997 anime, it is carried by a band of straw hats.
Yeah, nice. So
Yeah,
someone's got straw hat flag.
thank you.
Which,
I thought it
as soon as I
was.
saw that, it sounded familiar.
Yeah, it's just straw hats. The 1997 anime, it is carried by a band of straw hat pirates that stand up to corruption and repressive rulers. Its meaning has resonated across borders. Even though we have different languages and cultures, we speak the same language of oppression, said Gero Vincent Liberato. If that's your name, it's great. A 23-year-old, a recent graduate who helped organize the protests in the Philippines capital Manila. We see the flag as a symbol of liberation against oppression, that we should always fight for the future we deserve. So yeah, you can see it.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I've seen quite a few
lots of
protest
different places.
pictures where every time I'm just like, nice. Honestly, it's great. I love it.
Yes. And specifically the protests of late, which I think are really cool. I think Gen Z are doing some incredible stuff.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Around the world at the moment to push back against a lot of oppressive governments. The skull and crossbones has also become a symbol of Gen Z protests in Asia, like the ones that toppled Nepal's government last month. Fanillo says Madagascans watched what happened in Nepal, where many were angered by videos of the children of politicians living in luxury, or Nepo kids. We are going through the same things, and it gave us the courage to rise up and demonstrate, he says. We are demanding the complete overhaul of our entire system. As young people, we represent the future of our nation. Aside from Nepal, elsewhere in Asia, there have been youth-led protests in the Philippines over corruption and in Indonesia over politicians' perks. Europe isn't immune either, with young people in Serbia taking to the streets, and massive demonstrations this year over a deadly railway station collapse and perceived government corruption. Madagascar is not an isolated example in Africa either. Across the Indian Ocean and Kenya, on Africa's east coast, massive Gen Z protests have been taking place since last year when thousands of people took to the streets protesting an unpopular finance bill. At the height of the protests, the demonstrators stormed and partially burnt the parliament in Nairobi, and dozens of protesters were killed. So that gives you... there's also been protests in West Africa. In Togo in June, thousands turned out to protest what they said was the president's attempt to change the constitution and stay in power indefinitely. In Morocco as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a really good piece on Time magazine, I assume. That just has I think this was released today. Yeah, it was released today. But there's you just have to read through why they're all protesting, and you can already hear it in what I've just read out to you. But the parallels between each and every one of these that we're seeing. So Morocco. Where is it? Oh, it's right there. I literally highlighted. Sorry, what is this? Morocco. The protests come as more than a third of young people in Morocco under the age of 25 are unemployed, according to the country's statistics agency. Similar protests occur in Brazil over steep living costs and poor healthcare and education ahead of the country's hosting the 2014 World Cup tournament. Madagascar. Person did end up stepping down. The country's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has reduced the no, urban poverty is a key issue in Madagascar. Reported 75% of the country's residents affected by poverty as of 2022. That's a lot of people. Peru, which is most recent, I believe. The protest began on September 20th following the passage of a reform measure that will require young people to pay into a private pension fund. Taxi and bus drivers, meanwhile, say gangs are extorting them for money and that the government is not doing enough to intervene. Accusations of corruption, economic insecurity, and crime have also contributed to fierce government opposition and mass demonstrations. Nepal, which this one I think is the most exciting, in my opinion. After youth-led protests against corruption and a ban on major social media platforms toppled Nepal's government in early September, the leader of the demonstrations announced last week he will run in the country's March general election.
Nice.
Protests were ignited after a social media ban blocked 26 platforms for users in Nepal. In the following days, thousands of demonstrators took to the streets, and the Parliament building in Kathmandu was set on fire, along with the homes of high-ranking politicians.
Fuck yeah.
The protests were in part fueled by anger over Nepo kids, wealthy politicians' children who flaunt their lavish lifestyle on social media, highlighting disparities in wealth between the elite and the rest of the country. Roughly 20% of people in Nepal that were living below the national poverty line as of 2022. And then a key symbol of the protests of Nepal, along with all of those in other countries, is a manga flag depicting a skull and crossbones wearing a yellow hat. The symbol comes from the Japanese anime One Piece, in which pirate captain Monkey D. Luffy seeks to liberate the oppressed in fights against autocratic governments. And I believe the last one mentioned here is also the Philippines. The Philippine government estimated that as much as roughly 1.85 billion has been lost in the past 2 years to corrupt flood projects. Greenpeace, an environmental organization, has put the number higher. Yeesh. So because they have a ton of floods in the area, so
true, yeah.
Basically, not able to, not increasing their defense and against climate change and floods. So. But yeah, you can hear the parallels between all of these are the same. Young people are disadvantaged. A good number of people, or a good number of the populations are in poor living conditions under the poverty line.
Yes.
And major corruption has run rampant, and authoritarian governments that just continue to stay in power. So I'm not, of course I don't like political violence, but they are protesters, not typically the protesters that make it violent. It's usually the police that make it violent, and a lot of them unfortunately have been killed throughout all of these different places. Many unfortunately killed by violent actions against their protests. And but I think the Nepal one's kind of weird to say it's my favorite. Like they literally overthrew the government. They set their parliament on fire. We're like, no, we're not fucking doing this anymore. And they literally burned down the system. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's great. They're a really good example of how sometimes it's great to do things the proper route and the better route, but sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes things have to break before they can be fixed again. So,
Whoop. And
oh,
they did it
did I
through
go on?
Discord. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, again, great way to promo our Discord, guys. If you want to join, go to our website, bhn.nz. Links in the top right. But no, I think it's an awesome example. I do think that, you know, I just think it's funny because it's like, what do you expect when for the last however long the amping up of, I guess, political, societal commentary in art, such as, anime or music or all these types of things, we've been listening for a while, and Gen Z now have the ability, like they've grown up with everything pretty much being wholly online. They've been able to see more and in a bigger picture for, I guess, more of their developmental kind of life. So it makes sense that we're seeing them be a lot more, you know, active and being activists. But you can't really, fuck with, like, eventually everything's going to break. And that's what we've been going on, a system that's needed to break for a while. And we're
Mm.
seeing it happen around the world.
You make an interesting point, and it's something that I read when I was reading these that kind of brought up thought. But a lot of these countries are, um, they're not exactly third world countries, but they're definitely not your typical, um, like OECD Western nations. You know,
Mm,
it's not your UK's, your Australia's, Ireland's, France, Italy's. We're talking about Madagascar, Nepal, Peru, Morocco, the Philippines, Indonesia. Um,
mm,
I wouldn't know where to put all of these guys, but I definitely wouldn't say that they're the same as the US and Australia in terms of their the rigidity of their democracies, the ability to have fair and free speech. The um, well, US is kind of breaking that at the moment. Um, but you're right that the younger generations are using the technology that they have, the social media, the connections that they have to organize, but also cut through the bullshit.
mm.
One of the ones I was reading was like the propaganda doesn't work anymore because they can see it for themselves. I mean, we literally had it before. We were live streaming the flotilla, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
see it there. You can't hide the truth. It's
Exactly.
like you're literally
The only
seeing
thing they
it
can do
in
is try to kill the people who are sharing the truth, like we see with the journalists in Gaza, because
yeah.
they're
So,
losing control.
but the really interesting thing I think is that the we're seeing this in these countries where Gen Z are rising up and they're overthrowing their oppressive
Mm,
governments or corrupt governments. But we're seeing almost the exact opposite in your in like we're seeing it in New Zealand at the moment. Um and we're seeing it pretty much in every single country. There's the protests that we're seeing are of the far right
mm,
instead. And I was thinking that's really strange because we have the same issues, but certainly in smaller doses. It's not as rampant, but those same corruption, uh, the same sort of things do exist in our
yeah.
democracies, but
I
on a
mean,
much smaller scale. But I
there's
don't know
one
whether or not they
I
like. I
there's
don't
something I
understand
found in what
the
you said,
connection
though.
between them.
I
Yeah.
think I figured it out, because the main differences between the cultures that, like us, that aren't, versus, say, places like that, is kind of an individualist versus collectivist nations. Because a lot of those that you
Yeah.
mentioned, like in Nepal, like they live in a lot more collectivist type cultures where,
Yeah.
again, it's kind of like, I guess you could also then argue, we don't see the same necessarily out of, like, the majority of, like, New Zealand stuff, but we see it in, say, Toitū Te Tiriti and the Hikoi, where
Hmm.
the people are actually having to take that more the collectivist people are having to kind of champion and then be like, hey, this is not okay, this isn't right, and something has to
Mm.
change. So like that definitely seems like there's at least a line that kind of, but I think there's probably a number of different things too, because I mean, a lot of those are probably a lot smaller, obviously have their own unique context in terms of where they are positioned in the world, like how much
Mm.
inequality is also present. Like, I think the more disparaging the
Mm.
inequality, the more extreme you would kind of expect to see things happen when they finally break, because
Mm.
yeah, I think there's definitely going to be a number of factors to that. But
I mean, this pretty much sums that up, right? They've got a lot to
yeah,
sorry, we have a lot to lose. They've got nothing left to lose. And I think we, I know sometimes it feels like we're fear mongering a little bit. The US is a perfect example of if you let it continue, then it allows for the craziness, the like dictatorship, the authoritarianism is like the fascism in America. The
mm,
system that they have created has allowed that to continue to happen. And I think we are so privileged here that we don't see those through lines that it's very possible that we could end up in the same position and not get to it before it's too late. Which is
oh,
why you
absolutely,
need to continue to vote. It's why you need to continue to use the forms of democracy that we have and uh, force a good democracy. You know, not allow for corruption in our governments, even though it might be like teensy teensy little stuff. You know, it'll escalate once people are like, oh, I mean, I didn't need to disclose my 26 properties that I owned. Oh
mm-hmm,
well, what's the next thing going to happen? Oh, I didn't just clear the fact that I have $1 million in stocks in that company that I may
yeah,
have some influence in. Like it just, and it's like, oh well. And then Luxon rolls over and he's like, oh well, it's NZ first. They're not my. It's like
mm,
no, you can't allow that to happen. You have to set the standard. You need to continue that standard. And I think
absolutely,
what we are seeing now is we see those things and we want to stamp them out before that happens, or we will very quickly turn into the US, or we're going to very likely see the same protests that have turned violent, unfortunately, across the world happening here. Not fear
yeah,
mongering, just
no.
being realistic, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd argue it's not even oh, we want to avoid going down the same road as the US. We have to acknowledge we are already on the path to, like, we can see our future. It is up to us now to try and do something about making that diverge off, because we cannot allow ourselves get to that point. I mean, literally think about what they're doing, ICE is doing, and we have seen in America that slow, gradual, just, oh, we'll tolerate racism. We'll tolerate homophobia. We'll tolerate transphobia. We'll tolerate all these things to the point where we'll tolerate them literally kidnapping humans, whether they should be or not. Like, we see people getting kidnapped in international waters. It's not an if, it's a what can we do to make sure that we do not allow this to continue.